Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Meet, Greet, and Ask Us Anything. This is episode number 4. Today's guest is a business, estate, and real estate lawyer. Prior to practicing law, he was an entrepreneur starting up a business with his family. Outside the professional sector, he is a Tennis Canada certified tennis instructor. Please welcome Daleep Aujlay to the show.
Hi, Marlon.
Hey, Daleep, how are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today on Meet, Greet, and Ask Us Anything. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you're a business lawyer with Segev LLP here in Vancouver, BC. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, and give us your background.
Yeah, so I'm a lawyer here in Vancouver. I've been practicing law in Vancouver almost 6 years now, and I joined Segev LLP last November from another firm in Vancouver. And our office here, we're a business law firm, but that's quite far-reaching. We do everything from your mom and pop shop, you could call, to small startups, to large multinational corporations, and everything in between. And our practice encompasses everything, from the birth of a company, everything involved with the life of the company, and if there's ever an exit, a sale, or a wind up. So we're there with our business clients from beginning to potentially the end.
And
yeah.
Is there a certain sector or niche that you sort of have, like where you're kind of getting your clients from?
So the lawyers in the office, we cover practically every sector. But we also have some sectors that some law firms don't cover. So we have a very strong gaming practice. So we also have an esports practice. A gaming practice involves gambling. Online and bricks and mortar. So Ron Segev is the lawyer who runs that practice, and he's considered one of the best in the country in that area. And then we do everything from other tech companies, like I said, esports, and then we have restaurants, construction companies, a whole breadth of companies. So we're quite well versed in all areas of every sector in Vancouver, including real estate, because this is Vancouver. Real estate's a big business here. So any business you talk to usually has a real estate issue, whether it be purchasing an office space, purchasing property, or leasing. So, and then on the flip side, we have clients who are landlords as well. So we're pretty much in all areas of business law, and we also support our clients with other factors. We have a new lawyer joining us in a couple of weeks who's called in Ontario as well, who does a lot of civil litigation, commercial litigation, and family law. Awesome. And I also do estate law. So we work with a lot of our clients with respect to not only their business ventures, but their estate side of that as well, which is really important because they've spent all their hard work, effort, and time creating their venture, creating their wealth, and then they would like advice with respect to succession planning and with how they're going to deal with their estate going forward that they spent all this time and effort growing.
Totally, that makes so much sense. I think we actually got a couple questions regarding estate planning and succession planning for businesses and viewers. But taking it back during COVID right now, I mean, as a business lawyer, you're probably dealing with a whole array of issues with your clients. Is there something that's predominantly sticking out as an issue that's a revolving theme amongst your clients?
Yeah, the biggest one was leases, commercial leases. For restaurants, coffee shops, cafes, stores, retail. They were really affected by the lockdown, where landlords had mortgages to still pay and operating costs, so they wanted the rent paid, but the businesses weren't generating any revenue. So there's been a lot of work in that area with respect to when COVID came in. That was a big issue with our firm. Also, a lot of employment issues came up with respect to layoffs, employers wondering what they can do, employees asking us what their options are with respect to what their employers have brought forward. So we do have a couple of lawyers in the office that work who are employment lawyers. So they were busy as well during the last couple months.
I'm sure your family lawyers were probably busy as well.
Yeah. So Anna's joining us from Ontario. She's actually, I think she just spoke to her earlier today. She's road tripping across. Awesome. But from what I hear, she's been pretty busy.
Yeah. The family law sector, I mean, parents dealing with their children, everyone staying in the same household for long periods of time. I mean, obviously there's a lot of feelings that get built up in one household if you're still one together. So it makes sense. It makes sense from the business standpoint as well. Dealing with commercial leases, dealing with employment issues. COVID's been a really interesting time, and I don't think we've really dealt with anything like this on this scale, at least in my generation. So you've definitely experienced something that most lawyers probably have not experienced ever.
Yeah, this is something new for sure. It's hit all aspects for our field. I mean, like I explained from the business side, but even personally, I had a client who expedited their plan to buy their first home. They were planning to move out of kits and buy a house next summer, but they had a child, and the husband had to work from home now because of COVID, and they were in a small apartment. And so he's like, I need a house. I can't have a small baby and take conference calls in a 700 square foot apartment. So we saw, things like that happening too, where people had to make life decisions that were a result of the catalyst was COVID. So it's been far reaching.
And the one thing I have struggled with personally during this this pandemic is staying up to date on information as it's coming out from government agencies, from health authorities. How have you been staying up to date on the law, procedures, law society rules? How have you been staying up to date?
Yeah, so we're lucky where we have systems in place, so we get email updates regularly. We have students in the office who will provide the lawyers, an update with memos. So for us, we just have systems in place where we don't have to go out and really search for it. It kind of comes to us. But other than that, if you don't have that kind of system in place, really the only place to start would be the news, I guess, and then doing some of your own research and heading to the government websites and seeing what's out there.
Interpreting what they're saying and all that.
Yeah, it's tough because it's every day, you're hearing something new. So this is something new where we don't know what's happening in a week, 2 weeks. So it's a little tough. Lucky for us, we just have systems in place that lets us just try and helps us stay as much as we can on board with what's going on, and then we can help our clients out and adapt accordingly.
Right. So we've reached out to the audience for some questions before the show, and there seems to be a common theme. There's a lot of questions because people are uncertain of hiring a lawyer. Hiring a lawyer is not always the easiest thing to do. First of all, there's so many lawyers out there. How do you pick the right one? How do you know that they're going to be a good fit for you and your business? Do you have any tips or recommendations on how someone can go about choosing the right lawyer for their business?
Right. The best place to start first is, visit the website. So, if you search, I need a contract lawyer or commercial or corporate lawyer, on Google, that's where most people start. You can get a good feel maybe from the website, read their profiles, and just pick up the phone and call or send an email And you'll learn real quickly whether this is a professional that you can work with. In our office, we will have intake meetings via video conference. I found with video conference, it's easier just to get a vibe. For me, if this is a client that I can work with and help, and I think vice versa as well. So yeah, it's kind of like anything out there where you just have so many options. You kind of gotta go out and feel it out, really. A lot of it will just come down to feel and, and seeing their expertise. If, I would say it's important that if you have a business in a certain industry that, a lawyer has experience in it, that can definitely help. Because then the lawyer can give some just better niche and advice towards your industry. So, but that's gonna come from having a face-to-face or video or telephone conversation.
Building that
rapport. Building a rapport and just seeing if you're comfortable working with this person.
Mm-hmm. So why don't we dive into some questions directly from the audience? These were questions that were submitted beforehand. If anyone has any questions that they want to submit while we're talking live, please do so in the chat, and we can pull those up there as well. So we'll begin here. At what point should we consider taking on an investor? What legal steps should we or do they need to take?
Right. So taking on an investor, it's a bit of a broad term. You'll get people starting up a business and they'll have their parents help out or family and friends. Those people are investors. So the term investor is quite broad and people don't sometimes realize, oh, I'm an investor. If you're a shareholder in a company, you're essentially an investor. So it depends on the nature of your business. If you have enough capital yourself to start the business, and if you're taking out loans, so it's not a set in stone answer to that question. There's a lot of variables. So it just depends on the type of business you're in. If your startup business is going to have a lot of cost off the bat, then yes, you may need some third-party investors right away. But if your business you can run from a home office, you don't have much overhead, you don't need much equipment or inventory, then what you need is a lot different. So it will depend on the nature of your business I'm thinking as like third-party investor, which could be anything from families to other accredited investors, or there's venture capitalist money, which is as well an option, but usually at that point you're raising a lot of money. And if you're at that point, you usually have the business at a phase where where an investor will be comfortable in investing in. The legal steps that you should take is it's good to, when you're starting up your business, that's when you should talk to a lawyer, because the structure of the company structure of the business will be important. So it's easier to structure a company from the beginning. I mean, it can be altered later on, but you may be incurring unnecessary costs. Sometimes we can structure a company, but it's an organic object. Essentially, the company organic in that it's always evolving. So we may today say this is a structure that will suit what you think you'll need for an investor to have people come in, but that could change in a year, 2 years, depending on how your company operates and grows. But the legal steps really should start from the conversation at the incorporation phase, which is when you're creating your company.
So it starts off there, seek out your lawyer, get the advice, confidentiality agreements, get some agreements in place, shareholder agreements obviously as well.
Yeah, that's an important one.
Yeah.
That one's shareholder agreements are overlooked with startup companies that people kind of just do things on those. Shareholders agreement is usually one that's missing, but it's very important.
Can you explain to the audience just briefly what a shareholder agreement is?
Yeah, so a shareholder agreement is essentially, it will include items of such as, so let's say Marlon, you and I were starting a business and we're both going to be shareholders and we're both going to be directors. Directors are who manage and run the company, and there can be officers as well who do more day-to-day things. So the shareholders agreement will dictate, what our shares are, what shares we have, what decisions will need to be made by, let's say, a majority. So let's say if we have you, myself, and one other person, what decisions need all three of us to agree upon? What decisions do we just need 2 out of 3? So and these are like high level decisions or investments. So, an example can be is if the business is going to spend more than $10,000 on something, all 3 of us need to agree, or all 2. So it will dictate items like that. It will also talk about, items such as like cash calls, like what is the requirement for if we need to put more money into the company. And then what's really important is exiting, how a shareholder can exit. It gets really important where a shareholder may have a change in life circumstances, they may need to move, or for whatever reason, they can no longer be part of the business. And I want to sell my interest if I'm leaving. And if that's not already laid out, there's a lot of potential for conflict where I can say, well, I think the company's worth this much. You may think it's worth another amount. So we have it all itemized in the agreement on how we're going to value the company, how the buyout happens, what happens. And they can get very detailed, and we can cover a lot of circumstances, and it just depends on the business that you have and the number of shareholders. So that's why that agreement is important, because it helps with any issues down the road, preventing issues down the road. We have some shareholder agreements. I was just talking to Alon, Segev is a managing partner, where he has a shareholders agreement that's been helping this company for 20 years. Whenever something happens, when any kind of conflict happens, they have this shareholders agreement to come back to. What they all agree to was how they would deal with these certain items. So it can save money down the road and it can save relationships.
And if you ever wanted to change a shareholders agreement, is that an easy change to do? You probably have to get consensus of all the shareholders as well.
Yeah, so it's like any agreement. All the people who are party to the agreement would have to agree to any changes. But yeah, changes can happen. And as you investors coming in, investors agree to the shareholders agreements that's already in place. There's multiple ways to deal with that.
Awesome. On the topic of agreements, there's one more question about agreements. What is a buy-sell agreement? I know a lot of people have probably seen this term, but can you explain it? Because it's kind of ambiguous.
Yeah, buy-sell agreement could mean a lot of things, but like any purchase and sale agreement, it's essentially would be, hey, Marlon, I want to buy what you're selling. Mm-hmm. And the agreement will dictate how that purchase will happen and what certain conditions will be in place. So it can start off with what's called a letter of intent, where it just has high level items, usually saying, I will buy what you're selling. And it could be, it could be assets, like if I have a trucking company, I need to buy some trucks, or if you have a business, a complete business that you're selling, and I'm going to buy your whole business, the shares from it. So usually there's an asset. It can be like an asset purchase or a share purchase or sale, same thing. And so the agreement will lay out the terms of the purchase and sale. So what's included, what the price is, what the conditions are. Conditions are important because it allows the buyer to do their due diligence. So to make sure, if I'm buying a company, that they don't have any litigation pending, right? And whether if they do or don't, is that an issue for me? Are taxes paid? Things of that nature. So a buy and sell agreement encompasses all the terms with respect to what it is that I'm buying from you and what conditions are in place. And you also make essentially representations you'll make a simple representation is if I'm, for example, buying a truck from you, or I have a trucking fleet, you're saying, I do own all these trucks. That's a simple representation. Like, I have the authority, I can sell what I'm selling you. So that's why these agreements are important. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
So that hopefully that kind of clarifies what that is.
Totally. I have another question that we've gotten is, I have constant anxiety when it comes to my business. I was recently threatened by a customer that they are going to sue me. Probably happens to a lot of people. Instead, they posted negative reviews online. What can I do? I mean, this is probably a problem for a lot of people with businesses, Google reviews. In my experience, a lot of people will just, the only time they'll leave a review is a negative review. So how can you, what can they do?
Unless it's defamatory and it's untrue, there's not a lot of options. Really, if it's like a Google review, I know Google does have, and I think Facebook as well, they do have processes involved in place. So really, you can go onto Google, for example, and they have a form that you fill out why this review is inaccurate. And then Google will have their checks as well. But legally, your options are very limited unless it's defamatory. Then you can try and take that action. But with respect to negative reviews, you'll have to contact the platform that it's on. That would be the starting place. And for their own credibility, they do their checks, such as Google and Facebook, because they're not going to only allow positive reviews, because then the system wouldn't work.
I love logging into a business that has 100 perfect 5-star reviews. And either they're being very selective of who they ask, or
exactly. Yeah, it's an interesting space where how reviews work, because it's it's public perception, but everyone relies on it. I do. I'm going to a restaurant. Oh, it's got 4.5 stars. Oh, it's only got 2 stars. So it's got a lot of power.
But would you still go to a 2-star restaurant?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, right?
I think so.
You never know. Yeah. Lawyer?
Ooh, I don't know. But maybe. Yeah, I mean, like you said, with these reviews, you never know. It could be something that's completely out of someone's fault. That's not out of their control. Like I have a family business, and we'll get the most random questions or comments that come up. We have a blueberry farm, and we had someone who left a review because all the blueberries weren't the same size, and they weren't happy about that. But
act of God.
Yeah, it's a plant. It grows. We can't really control that. But yeah, so I think I think the general public is, when you read reviews, you can say, okay, you can kind of get a vibe of whether that's a legit review or not.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, with this question, I totally understand why they're feeling this way, because especially nowadays, everyone's looking online, everyone's reading reviews. So if you have a negative review that's not true, it hurts your reputation. It's probably going to lose you business. So I understand the anxiety. Thank you for asking.
And I, as a business owner, definitely, and we lawyers, we get reviews too. So we feel that anxiety as well. So if it isn't true, the place to start is with I would say the platform it's on, and if it's outrageous enough that you want to bring legal proceedings against, if it's defamatory, then that is a process that you could start, and you would then contact a lawyer about that.
Which brings me to my next question. I want to partner / amalgamate with another business. What should I be aware of beforehand? I think we mentioned a little bit before about taxes, but making sure the taxes are paid, there's no outstanding litigation. Do you have any other little tips that they should be looking out for?
Yeah. So if you're going to amalgamate, so people know what that means. If you have a business and I have a business, and we're going to merge essentially. From a legal perspective, other than the business perspective, whether it will work, our businesses will help each other grow. This is where the due diligence part comes in place. And then this is where your lawyer will help you out as well. So normally the way this process works is this: I was coming to you, Marlon, and I were going to amalgamate. We would have a letter of intent. Letter of intent will have conditions in place which will allow, if I had hired a lawyer, to do the due diligence. And depending on the nature of the business, we would do a wide range of due diligence with respect to if this is someone I want to partner with. And then it goes from everywhere to doing, like work safe checks to employment. And then, if there's property involved, checking bylaws, checking title, checking if there is any potential litigation, or if there is any litigation, bankruptcy. There's a wide range of searches where your lawyer will be able to work with you and, essentially go through a checklist of items that they recommend that we should do these checks on. And then once a due diligence comes back, then we can either, as a client, can say, I'm okay with that. Or we then talk to the other side and raise that. And then the other side may try and rectify it. For example, if they're behind on certain employment payments, or if if there's a work safe issue, or there's outstanding, they didn't pay their property taxes. Right. So that's where the other side can come in and rectify that. And we would then put that in the buy and sell agreement, or here would be, an agreement here to amalgamate. So that's how those two things attach: as the letter of intent, which kind of like preliminary locks in the deal. We do our due diligence. Depending on what our due diligence finds, we can then put that into our agreement, and then to ensure what the two parties want occurs. So, and then you on your side would be doing the same check. So I would do a corporate search, make sure your corporate minute book is in place, your records are up to date, your annual reporting are done. There'll be times where people haven't done their annual reporting and they think they have a company, but it's been struck, which means it's been involuntarily dissolved by the government because the filings haven't happened. Right. And so that could be a whole process. So
every year, people, every year.
Yeah, every year. You got to do your annual reports. So there's a lot of things to be aware of, but the thing to really, if you want to remember one or two words, it's due diligence. And it's really important to do your due diligence. And to do it properly, you need to engage a professional, a lawyer, who can help you with the due diligence and do the due diligence for you. And it can take time. So, it's not like Marlon, you're going to decide we're going to do this next week, and then we go find a lawyer. These things takes time, because we're due diligence, it's not just, a search online. We're contacting government agencies, and we got to hear back from government agencies. And with COVID also now, things just take longer. Right. So this due diligence can take weeks, if not a month or two, depending on the nature of the deal.
Makes sense. What is a trust, and how do you set it up, and what are the benefits? I know a lot of people probably have heard they're holding money in trust for somebody. They're a beneficiary of a trust. What is a trust? Can you explain that for the audience?
Yeah. So a trust it's not an entity, unlike a company, which is we call a non-human person. But a trust is something that is, CRA looks at it as if it is an object you could think of. But essentially a trust is where a trustee is holding assets on behalf of another person, for simplicity. So what a trust can do is you can use trust for estate planning, and you can also do it for creditor protection as well. So with respect to the benefits of an estate plan, is if you move your assets into a trust, you no longer are the personal owner of that asset. And so if you were to pass away, what happens here in BC is your assets fall into your estate.
Right.
So if it could be your house, it could be shares you own, your bank accounts that you own on your own, solely own, not own jointly, what's called a joint tenancy with another individual. So these are items you cover on your own. This is a really broad topic, which could take like half hour on its own.
Yeah, quick.
Really,
quick one. Yeah.
Just the quick benefit from an estate perspective can be is you can save on probate fees, which will be 1.4% of the value of your estate. So if you have significant assets, a trust can be very helpful. It keeps your estate private. Going through probate, your estate will become public. So that's another benefit of a trust. Like I mentioned, it does provide for some creditor protection. And really, whether you need a trust or not, the place to start is actually you can speak to your accountant. And that's where you start to set it up. So you would essentially contact a lawyer or an accountant. So we get contacted and we get someone saying, hey, Lee, we want to do an estate plan. And I say, okay, give me a rough idea of the value of your assets or the type of assets you have and what kind of work do you do, so I can gauge the risk. And then if it looks like a trust might be helpful, you involve your accountant, for example, and then your accountant and your lawyer will work together to help create this trust. Right. I know, but that's a very, very short summary. We could do a whole other half-hour conversation on how estate planning works and how trusts fall into, and there's a whole bunch of different types of trusts. So it's a pretty wide area.
We'll get back to that in another episode.
Sure.
We'll bring you back on and we'll talk about trust and estate planning. How about that?
Yeah, I think, sure, I'm down. That'll be, that's good, yeah.
Perfect. So before we wrap up here, I have one quick question for you. What's one tool or software that you're using during COVID that you could not live without?
Webcams for Zoom and FaceTime. It's what's made it possible for us to continue doing our work. We do a lot of work over email and telephone, but I personally like to meet clients face to face, or other professionals when we're working together for a client. So video conferencing has definitely helped, and Zoom, FaceTime, or all the other platforms out there have made it possible. And there's certain documents that you have to witness in person, but the courts have made it possible during this time to do that over video technology. So that's otherwise we would have been stuck. For example, what's a document called an affidavit? You're supposed to swear in person in front of the lawyer. You can now do it over video technology. Whether this will continue after COVID, we don't know. But so I would say the ability to do face-to-face via webcam has been a tool that's been one that I don't think we could have really been without.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with you. On that note about about signatures on court forms, I just learned today that in the Provincial Court of British Columbia, you do not need to sign documents as of current. If you're filing them online, affidavits don't need to be signed, and that sort of thing. It's a new update they recently came out with, but people should be aware. Daleep, thank you so much for your time today on Meet, Greet, and Ask Us Anything. I know our audience got a lot of value out of what you've told us. Thank you so much. Really appreciate having you on the show. And thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next week for Meet, Greet, and Ask Us Anything. Have a great day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.